joining from North America. So Changyi Lee is an associate professor at Kennesaw State University. Her research interest lies in foreign language, learners' motivation and code switching, and technology of foreign language learning. Eun-young Won is an associate teaching professor in the Department of Asian Languages and Literature at the University of Washington in Seattle. Her teaching and research focused on second language pedagogy, including computer-assisted language learning. And then these two distinguished presenters will talk about weaving stories on the web through the lens of multi-literacies approach. So without further ado, please join me welcoming these two speakers.
Thank you, Eun-san. Can everybody hear me okay?
All good.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming to our presentation. Good evening, everyone. Greetings from the Northern Hemisphere. Now it's 12:10 a.m. here, and I hope I can stay awake until the session ends. Hi, my name is Changyi Lee, and I'm teaching Korean at Kennesaw State University near Atlanta in Georgia. And my co-presenter.
Hello, this is Eun-young Won, and I'm teaching Korean at the University of Washington in Seattle. Now it's 9 p.m. here. Nice to meet you. Oh.
Right. Before I start, I'd like to take a moment to thank the organizing committee for all their hard work put into this very timely panel discussion in response to the crisis and challenges we've been facing. Thank you. And now let's get it started. In our presentation, we'll briefly touch some key principles of the multi-literacies approach to language teaching and learning. And we'll then showcase the instructional modules that we created based on a multi-literacies framework and piloted in our own courses at our universities. We'll proceed through a digital book publication process and share our multi-literacies products for hopefully adaptation to your own teaching. To give you a little bit of theoretical background and context of our presentation, I'd like to talk about the why, what, and how of a pedagogy of multi-literacies. First, the why of a multi-literacies pedagogy. Foreign language education in the US has undergone some major paradigm shifts and transformations over the past several decades. And communicative language teaching has been the predominant foreign language teaching framework, as you might well know, especially at lower levels in US colleges and universities, focusing on effective communication, connections between form and meaning, and the learner. Some scholars, however, have raised concerns about its inherent limitations, including its primary focus on oral language use in standard texts, and its shallow handling of cultural and textual content. These limitations of communicative language teaching have prompted many scholars to call for foreign language curricular reform. Along the same line, to move beyond the typical two-tiered structure of foreign language programs with the language versus content dichotomy and the lower introductory levels versus upper advanced levels dichotomy, foreign language curricular changes have become even more imperative than ever. And a multi-literacies-based pedagogy has been proposed in 1990s as one pathway toward foreign language curricular reform. In fact, some key persons of the very first group of people who proposed a multi-literacies-based pedagogy are from Australia, like Bill Cope, Alan Luke, Carmen Luke and Martin Nakata. Does any of them sound familiar to you? Anyway, since then, the multilyricist approach is taking center stage as a framework that can address the language, literature, culture divide in foreign language programs across the nation for many, many years. Then, what is a multilyricist approach? It is an approach to foreign language teaching and learning that is grounded in understanding and participating in a variety of texts across a range of modes and genres in favor of a broader and more coherent curriculum in which language, culture, and literature are taught as a continuous whole. In one word, the what of multilyricist pedagogy is teaching content through target language texts. For example, oral, written, visual, audio-visual, digital documents in cultural contexts. Then the how of a multilyricist pedagogy comprises interpretation, collaboration, conventions, cultural knowledge, problem solving, reflection, and language use to bridge the gap between introductory communicative language teaching and advanced literary teaching. Also, the increase in the availability of new technologies and communication channels these days has led to an explosion, increasing interest in its use in language classroom and language programs. And it is contributing to a foreign language instruction paradigm shift from earlier notions of literacy to new literacies. As we all have witnessed, teaching that employs digital technologies supports student-centered learning environments where autonomous learning takes place and contributes to language development even more evidently in the current pandemic environments. So the adoption of a multilyricist framework is not entirely new, and we are going to showcase a pedagogical model for integrating textual content into introductory and intermediate language courses with an example of the multilyricist focused learning modules using a web-based tool. Eun-young?
Thank you, Jung. So I'm going to talk about an application called Storyweaver. Storyweaver is a collaborative platform for reading, creating, translating, and storytelling multilingual children's books. It was originally developed by a publishing company in India called Pradhan Books. There are several thousand books in over 100 different languages in Storyweaver. The reading levels are divided into 4. Level 1 with less than 250 easy repeated words. Level 2 has 250 to 600 words. Level 3 with 600 to 1500 words, and level 4 has over 1500 words with longer and more nuanced stories. The most exciting part of Storyweaver is that all are licensed, so users have the right to use, reuse, share, or even build up creative work, make new work. All tools on this platform are free. The users can read stories, translate stories, and create new stories. For English and some of Indian dialects, users also can use audiobook functions called read along. People contributed thousands of free images, and users can create stories using those images. It also has a very user-friendly translation system, so people can translate any existing stories into their own languages. I will show how Storyweaver can be utilized in classes using examples from 2 universities in the US. We named our Storyweaver related projects book project. First of all, we will talk about the story creation project. The target levels are from beginner through advanced. The procedure consists of 4 major steps: writing the draft, editing and revision, publishing, and presenting. At the draft stage, students go over the guidelines and then choose their topics. At the University of Washington, I had students post their topics or titles on the discussion board of our website. The topics my students came up with varied, ranging from personal stories such as travel, family, friends, food, hobbies, and college life, to fictional creative stories. Once they decide on their topics, students then start writing the draft using the vocabulary and grammar points learned. They were told not to try to write something beyond their language proficiency level. After students submit their draft via Google Doc, the instructors give feedback using suggestion mode. In the case of Kennesaw State University, the instructor had students divide their draft into 3 parts. Submitting each portion once. First, the students write an introduction and the teacher gives feedback. Then students edit and revise their introduction based on the teacher's feedback and resubmit the revised introduction together with the body draft. Then the teacher gives feedback on the second paragraph, body part, and students edit again. Students then submit the revised body together with a newly written conclusion. Then the teacher gives feedback and students make their final revisions. A lot of work. In the publication stage, students used the built-in tools on Storyweaver to publish their books. As you can see on the screenshot, tools are easy to use. First, you choose the language, type in the title which you already made, decide on the level, and then press the start button. To insert images, click on the Start with Images button and search images, or you can insert your own photos or pictures you drew. After publishing their books, students had a storytelling presentation. Students presented their work in class or recorded videos and shared them on our course webpage. Students were asked to read other books written by their classmates and left a comment on the discussion board. I'm going to samples. The first one is a book by a student from Korean 101 at Kennesaw State University. In this book, the student used all 3 resources for her images: pictures she drew, photos she took, and the illustrations provided from Storyweaver. The second sample is by by 2 students. They worked together. 2 students from Korean 103, the last quarter of first year Korean at the University of Washington. 2 students worked together, so it is more longer. Yes. And then next, Jeong-hee is going to talk about translation project.
Thank you, Nyang. All right, translation activities. It really merges language and content and develops learners' linguistic competence through meaningful interaction with authentic literary texts. And these activities extend beyond the communicative language teaching oriented focus on functional oral language usage to include integrated language use, and reading, writing, listening, viewing, and speaking tasks are developed as complementary modalities throughout the process. So translation is indeed a great pedagogical application that instantiates and models the multiliteracies framework and holistically reflects the integration of principles inherent in a multi-literacies approach, such as interpretation, problem solving, conventions, cultural knowledge, and so on and so forth that I mentioned earlier. So continuing to provide you with a setting to weave the website, Storyweaver, I'll take you to its translation platform and walk you through. First, students reflect on, okay, here we go. So students reflect on texts available at Storyweaver and language use in the process of selection of a story. They set the select language to Korean. And once they select a story, they collaborate by interacting with the text, visual images, and other learners and instructor in my case, to create meaning in the process of writing a translated draft. This creating meaning process takes place in our learning management system like Blackboard, Canvas, Moodle, and Brightspace by D2L, whatever your school employees that are designed to help us manage student coursework, assignments, and evaluations. Our school uses Brightspace by D2L, and I'll walk you through our D2L very briefly. So, I lost the cursor. All right, I'll take you to our the D2L later. I can't find my cursor. So for their writing, they use language to focus on linguistic forms and contextualize discourse and analyze conventions in this particular genre and reflect on cultural notions and conventions to explore and identify differences in the use of conventions and cultural notions to describe similar items and to express linguistic, cultural, and social perspectives into the target language, which is Korean in our case, without modifying the original text. As such, students apply the linguistic and cultural knowledge in a creative way and expressive way. And finally, students publish their final product worldwide using the website's tool, and it serves as a formative assessment. The tool is pretty straightforward and user-friendly, and Storyweaver guides students through the translation process with video tutorials. And I also provide my students with samples and demos to get them going. Then students perform their work orally as a means of storytelling. This performance can be digitally recorded, and just like our presentation, and serve as a summative assessment for the project module. The time commitment from instructors increases dramatically. but I've found this digital platform very meaningful, versatile, and effective, especially for online teaching. And I do have some example translation products here, but I'll present them to you during the Q&A session if we can find enough time for it. So move on to pedagogical implications. The instructional module that we showcased today for integrating language and content, which has been successfully implemented in introductory university level Korean courses, has several pedagogical implications. It complements lower level introductory communicative foreign language classrooms that have a focus on practicing new linguistic forms rather than engaging in meaningful language use or interpreting texts. Even learners with extremely limited foreign language capabilities are able to engage with culturally rich textual content, and that such engagement in turn facilitates their linguistic development. Also, this type of both language and content-based instruction can lead to possibilities of true collaboration in a multiliteracy framework that is socially situated through interaction with texts and others within a classroom community. For example, writers collaborate by considering their audience as they make decisions about what must be said. And readers collaborate by contributing their own experiences and knowledge to textual meaning making. As such, collaboration allows students to be immersed in texts and construct meaning jointly as they give and receive assistance in textual creation and interpretation. Another example of collaboration would be peer editing, which can be considered more proactive than peer assessment that Professor Toda's presentation delved into yesterday. And of course, feeling a sense of accomplishment and packaging their experience and accomplishment for their resume and or job interviews later are definitely rewarding and making all the hardships they've been through disappear. All right, back to Nyang to talk about some obstacles to our multiliteracy-based instructional module to conclude our presentation.
Okay, thank you. The most challenging part in implementing this book project load. In the case of University of Washington, there were over 120 students in Korean 103 and reading nearly 70 student draft from my sections was very challenging. I tried to give 5 to 10 minutes at the end of classes so that students can work on their own book project and I could help individually. However, it was still a lot of work on the instructor's side. Also, deciding on how much and what kind of feedback to give students among myself and my teaching assistants was challenging too. Another limitation of this project could be that it is almost impossible to prevent students from using upgraded AI trends such as Papago. Also, in the case of translation project at an advanced level, how we can solve copyright issues is still unclear. It will be great if we could have the option to translate a popular Korean writer's work and publish it on Storyweaver. There are aspects of this web application we would like to be improved. Right now, only English and some of Indian dialects have the audio book function. If other languages could also access this function, it will motivate students more. Lastly, for language programs or faculty members that are interested in developing teaching methods, teacher training on theories and practices would need to follow. This is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Unyoung and Jung-hee, for a wonderful presentation. Yeah, that was very interesting. I really like, as a Korean instructor myself, I really like to have students take something with them after they're done with this one course. So I think the storytelling or like story making or translating presentation is very rewarding for students. So now I'd like to open the floor for discussions. Is there any questions or comments from the floor? Here I have one question from Yuko. Her question goes like this: how can students decide their language level for the story writing? I think the presenter said that students were advised not to write beyond their language competence level.
Jung-hee, do you want to say something?
Oh, you can go ahead first.
Okay. In 103, in our first year Korean class, most students did like level 1. So they wrote up to around 250 or less. And so deciding the level was not really challenging part. There were a couple of students who wanted to go further. In that case, there are a couple of students did level 2, were a little higher than other students. But other than that, most first year students did level 1.
Thank you. And we have another question in the chat box, and then I will move on to Jian's question. Okay, so the question from Li Hong, could you send me the link for Storyweaver? So I think they're really interested try to this book project. So it'll be great if you can just copy the address, URL, and then share with us. Is that okay?
Sure, sure.
Thank you.
Storyweaver.org.
Sure. Okay, and then Jian, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lee and Dr. Wang, for introducing this tool. My question actually is related to kind of my topics, the assessment piece. I can imagine that the amount of work for feedback, but I wonder how it is marked. Is it marked for multiple versions before the first feedback, or like before the 3 components are put together, or is it marked at the very end? Or is it using like rubrics to mark? If peer editing were used, how would you imagine a student using the same kind of rubric to mark? Because like I'm really thinking about the application side of this. If I were to do this, how would I do this? Thank you.
All right. In my case, for the creating a story, since our submissions are quite a lot, it's 3 times, and so on the students' end, the work is tremendous amount. It involves a tremendous amount of work. So to be generous for them, I do not mark any points for the grading purpose for this, the initial draft. But after I give you the feedback, and then they are expected to revise their draft based on my feedback. And after I receive the revised version, I the grade. To be fair, that's my belief. So that assessment is step by step, right? After first submission and the second submission, and the assessment includes even the storytelling, their storytelling skills. So it's very to me it's systematic, and I try to make the students understand the rubrics and assessment process. The whole process is very systematic, and that they can follow. And for translation, it's the submission, also the first draft, second draft, third draft, as many drafts as they make until they make an error-free final draft. So it depends on how much how much time and efforts they put into in their revising process, and how attentive they are on my feedback in their revision process. So they make 5 drafts, 10 drafts, it doesn't matter. So I don't penalize in the middle of revision process, but the final process by the due. If they some don't make any error-free final draft, I have to grade it as is. And if they make a final draft along with me, working with me throughout the process, they'll get a perfect score. So I just try to encourage them and motivate them in assessment.
Thank you. It sounds like that you are focusing on the progress of students and then whether they pay attention to your feedback and then improve themselves, right? Okay, sure. We have 1 minute left. So is there any burning questions from the floor? If then, can I ask a question? So I had a couple of questions, for example, using Google translations and then the workload, because certainly it sounds like a lot of work for instructors, but you already mentioned in your challenges and limitations. So I was wondering, if you have done any thing to get over these challenges. For example, if I were using this project, then probably I will make it as a group project, or I will ask students to include certain grammar points to make sure that they incorporate everything they learned and something like that. So is there any tips that you want to share? Either Changyi or Eunyoung?
In my case, in my case, because I have so many students, I cannot go like step-by-step feedback, just like as Changyi does. So in my case, I try to give short times in every class, not every class, but maybe twice a week or 3 days a week, 3 classes a week, 5 to 10 minutes, just a little short time, so that students can work their own. Or I also gave an option to they work together, 2 people, not more than 2 people. Yeah, but I think group was a good idea. So next time I might include that option as well. Some students want to work alone and some students work as a group. So in my case, they could choose either work alone or work with another student. And then they, I just spare some time in class so that they can ask questions or vocabulary or how they form sentences. So I try to help as much as I can. But even so, still, when I look at their work outside the class, like it is a lot of work, but at the same time, it is fun to read. I try not to give like grammar point, certain grammar point, like that you have to include. I didn't, because I kind of wanted to have them explore their creativity. Some actually wrote like pretty creative writing, even with just small, with limited vocabulary and limited grammar knowledge. Still, they could like write a very fun, creative stories. And so I think it depends on the instructor, but in my case, I also wanted to keep their creativity part. So I didn't give any like rules, like include like 10 of grammar points or like 20 vocabulary from this quarter. I didn't do that.
Thank you. I'm sure that they really enjoy this project. Chung-Yi, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, to piggyback on what she just said, I just try not to make students feel burdened, feel burnt with this project. Instead, I just want them to enjoy the whole process. So going back to the first question for us, related to the level choice, that's why we limit the levels to level 1 or level 2, the paying attention to the word limit, so that they can fully enjoy the whole process. And that way they can take just one small step toward the final product.
Thank you again so much for introducing this wonderful and practical tool for all of us. I really enjoyed it. Okay, for the interest of time, let us move on to the next presenter. So the next presentation, the title is Language Assessment in Remote Language Teaching and Learning. And Dr. Qian Wang will talk for us. And she is the Director of Language Programs and an Associate Professor of Teaching in the Asian Studies Department at the University of British Columbia. And she manages one of the biggest Chinese language courses in North America. And also we are very happy to have her today because she's one of the distinguished instructors who won the UBC Killam Teaching Prize. So without further ado, please welcome me joining. Welcome me joining Qian.
Hi, everybody. Thanks again for the organizing committee for making this happen. And thanks for all of the colleagues who come here in knowledge and expertise. As Unsen introduced, and from British Columbia, Canada. So I actually have the same time zone with Dr. Wang in Washington, Seattle. So it's 9:45 p.m. today, right now. Now, in my presentation today, I'm going to talk about language assessment. Please forgive me if I don't seem to be looking directly into the camera because I have my share screen on external screen. So I'm looking at my screen, not that I'm absent-minded. So in today's session, I wanted to first ask you to share some of your experiences first. And then I'm going to talk about how I have some of my practical experiences in redesigning language assessment in remote learning. If I have time, I wanted to touch upon integrity in language assessment in this new remote learning era, and then open the floor up. Okay, so first, let me ask. I was going to use poll for within the Zoom function, but that didn't happen. Thankfully, we still have the chat window. So if I could, I don't seem to be able to find the chat window, but if you can share your experiences regarding this question on my screen that says, can you tell us what are some of the ways in which you typically assess students' learning in face-to-face language learning environments? You could say A or AB or AC or D or F or whatever that you have been doing in a regular face-to-face classroom for language teaching, language assessment. Anything. Oh, I like that. Other responses? A, C, D, F, close to all. Great. So I'm gonna try to, in the interest of time, A and E, thank you. In the interest of time, I'm gonna move on to my next question, which is similar but different. Now that we are in online teaching mode or remote teaching mode, what changes did you make to assessment? Did you simply move everything unchanged from a paper-based media to online? Did you change the percentage? Did you change some summative assessment to formative? What are some of the things that you have been doing in this transitioning time? Again, I would really appreciate if you can share with me your ideas. Lower percentages of the exams, thank you. Any other things that you have been doing? B, redistributing percentage. So apparently what we're seeing here is a common theme of changing the percentage, right? C and E, so change the summative to formative, change the frequency of assessment tasks. Thank you. And then B and E, so E, design new assessments. Bravo, that must be hard and very time consuming. And apparently a lot of us would still be using A because who has the time to do everything new? Lastly, I'm sorry I'm moving so fast. On the third page, I'm trying to get a sense, what's your biggest concern or biggest concerns in language assessment now that we're in the online learning mode or remote learning mode? Is it preventing cheating or plagiarism? Are you worried that the learning objectives are not achieved? Or are you worried that we don't have anything to show that students have been learning or has learned anything? Or are you worried about the technological failure that just happens every single day, from my point of view? B, A, B, A and D. So there are a lot of common themes here. I guess with this, with Paul or without Paul, what we can see here, thank you everybody, is that we actually share, because I've done this more than one time, so I believe all language instructors, we share some common traditional assessment tasks like quizzes or exams, individual project. But then in the new online teaching mode, we have been doing different things. Some of us used the original exam and moved that online. Some of us changed the percentage, changed the frequency, or changed the percentage, the ratio between formative and summative. But why did we do the things that we did? We have similar concerns because, and then some of our concerns are from a preventive side of things because we don't want them to cheat. We don't want them to be engaged in any act or practice of plagiarism. Some of them are more instructive. So from these shared knowledge, I wanted to kind of share what I believe we could do in redesigning assessment for remote language teaching and learning. And again, if we have time, I want you to touch upon the idea of integrity in the broader sense in assessment. Now, in redesigning language assessment, it's not an easy job when you think about redesigning. I have a quote that I really loved from one of the workshops that I participated back in May from my colleagues, and I asked her for the permission to use the slides. So I borrowed the slides. In the slides, I want you to focus on almost all sentences, but basically the essence is saying that we often see assessment as a tag on in course design. So we don't pay too much attention to it. And once we move into the online context, we often see this as a, we import whatever we were doing in face-to-face version into the online media. That's it. Well, this is a bad idea for many reasons, but the assessment piece, it suffers more because we actually have an opportunity to make our assessment better in online teaching. And if we don't make use of that because of the new learning environment, then we're losing that opportunity. So for this reason, I'm going to share some of my considerations and proposals for language assessment design, or actually redesign, not design, but redesign. And this includes change the weight distribution, as some of you have already mentioned, change the percentage of different tasks, change the ratio between summative and the formative tasks, use alternative formats, just like the ones that Dr. Lee and Dr. Wang just mentioned before this in the presentation, like using Storyweaver to ask students to provide stories. And lastly, I encourage everybody to think outside the box using this online media. For every approach, I'm going to talk about some examples that I've been using and the advantages and disadvantages. Well, first of all, when we think about change weight distribution, one of the biggest things that I've learned from all of the workshops that I participated in from March until all the way into August is that students are so worried about all of those high-stake assessment tasks. It's probably not a good idea to continue to use them. My proposal is going to be to change a high-stake assessment task into a few smaller tasks. For example, this year at UBC, in the Chinese language program, and I believe for most of the Japanese courses, I haven't had a chance to talk with our Korean language coordinators yet, so I don't know the case there. But for Chinese and Japanese language courses, we don't have midterms and final exams. Instead, we have been using lesson quizzes. In my own case, I've created two quizzes for every lesson. If we have 10 lessons, now I have a total of 20 lessons, which is a lot compared to the past. Now, this is my course online. As you can see, I've already published, we've already covered 4 dialogues, so 8 quizzes. So for every dialogue, we would have 2 quizzes, one on vocabulary and one on more integrated skills. In this way, some students are still worried, but if you just convince them, it's very low stake. If you made a mistake, remember the mistakes that you've made and move on. That's usually easier for students to take rather than a high stake 20% exam that's happening during 2 hours. Now, the advantages, like I said, it reduces student stress level, but also it increases the flexibility on both sides for instructors. So what I have been doing is that I'm changing my quizzes for each lesson just by a little bit based on student learning and based on what I've observed. Unlike a big midterm exam that's worth 30% that I have to get done at least 3 weeks before the midterm. For this, I usually just make the changes the night before based on students' submitted work. So it's a lot of flexibility there. The second thing that I have been doing is to change the ratio between summative and formative assessment. When I say formative assessment here, I meant formative in a very broad sense, such as open textbook tasks, multiple attempts tasks where you receive feedback, and then you can do this again, this kind of thing. There are many practices or exercises, if you think about it, in language that are really just more like a drill kind of practice. For example, pronunciation, perception. You hear a word, you tell me what you hear. You don't really need a teacher to be there. This can be conducted online and students can do it again. pattern drills. You provided pattern, students are going to repeat the pattern. The computer can mark them for you. Vocabulary are similar, and I've designed quite a few grammar multiple attempt exercises with the video kind of cues and then feedback. So I'm just gonna quickly show you a few examples here. So if you look at my screen right now, for just one lesson, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 exercises for students to try out. And all of them are multiple attempts, at least 2 attempts. Some of them are unlimited attempts. And similarly, I have things like this is a pronunciation. These are no points attached. These are practice tests that they can do again, until they are confident that they are familiar with the pronunciation. In a grammar exercise, if you could see it here, I have the questions up on the screen, but then I have the hints, which are basically the grammar explanations, like I used to do in a class. Now I'm just putting it on the learning system, and students can make a wrong attempt, do something wrong, check the hint, check the feedback, and do this again until they get 10 out of 10. So this is what I meant by a formative assessment, and I've significantly increased the percentage of formative assessment in my teaching. Some of these exercises are multiple attempts, and some of these exercises are just marked as completion, because I fully agree with Dr. Lee when she mentioned how she marked the translation work as well as the story writing work. We are trying to encourage them to learn. So I don't want to penalize them for making a mistake, because in that way they won't learn. The important thing is that they learn from the feedback and going forward. So the advantage of this is that we're shifting from testing mind to learning mode. Students are learning from the different attempts, and it allows for self-paced learning. Some students only do this once because they got 10 out of 10 for the first attempt. Some of them did this for, like, you see them making progress from 5 to 7 to 9.5 for their last attempt. I don't realize this, but I was just checking student activity. You see that students have much more contact with learning materials in this way, because once they have 3 attempts, most of them wanted to make use of the 3 attempts to get 10 out of 10. So they are making themselves to work harder in this way. The other proposals I have is to use alternative formats. I actually don't think I need to say too much more about this, because in our first presentation, we heard the perfect alternative assessment task. It's not a quiz, it's not filling in the blanks, but it's a comprehensive kind of tasks or a project that would allow students to use all their multi-literacy skills in completing this task. I have a similar task that's called e-portfolio. That's not a story, but it has a similar idea behind it. The last idea that I wanted to share, it's not exactly assessment, but this is me, think outside the box. I know it's all online. No students come into classroom now. So I asked myself, how could I take advantage of this and do something good? So we decided to set up a one-on-one oral practice for all of the 450 language students in Chinese this year, so that they could have 1 hour of oral practice every week. We did this in the past, but we couldn't afford to have one-on-one because student schedules are so hard. Right now, it's easy. Everybody is online. You just with a click away, they're online. And it's so much easier to connect with native speakers across the world, because despite the fact that they're in different time zones, they can get connected with our learners. So we have been doing that. It's a lot of work, but students get 1 hour, one-on-one oral practice every week. I'm very proud of what we have been doing. I don't think we have time to cover in detail about the integrity part, I just want to quickly mention that when we think about, whenever students or the university mentions ideas such as academic dishonesty, we automatically switch to the idea of cheating, plagiarism. And our mindset is automatically switched to, how do I prevent cheating? If they're doing this quiz online, how do I know they're not cheating?
Encourage all of us. Sorry, can you still hear me? Yeah, okay. So I seem to have problems with my cell phone or my earplug. My idea is to not just look at the opportunity here, but to look at the perceived pressure and the rationalization part of things. With this, I actually means, let's not just look at what we can do is to reduce the pressure for students to cheat. If we have a lot of low-stake exams or formative assessments, students don't feel the pressure that they have to cheat. Furthermore, we have to add the piece of telling them that it's not okay to cheat. It's not okay to use Google Translation to do your translation homework. And that has to be a conversation that starts from the very beginning, that continues into every quiz, every assignment that they do. I do have some tricks that I think would help. So if this becomes an interesting topic, we can talk about that. But otherwise, in the interest of time, I'm going to stop right here. And thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. Such a great presentation, and I learned a lot, because assessment is it's something that every instructor has in mind, actually, and it's really hard. And then I think I myself was worried too much about the like the cheating, and still can't get away from paper-based or quizzes and, you know, like midterms, and like, really, like, don't I have to have that? Like, I have these doubts, but I think I want to try something different this time, thanks to you. Okay, now the floor is opened for questions and comments. Is there anyone who wants to go ahead?
Or just share your frustration with us. It's always good.
Could you?
Eun-young, go ahead, please.
Could you share more about one-on-one practice? Like, do you use like some kind of programs, or do you find the native speakers by yourself, or the instructors find the native speakers, or how do you set up those one-on-one practice?
You mean the oral practice 101?
Yes.
Yes, so we, in terms of the material, the 101 oral practice material, the instructors and the TAs come up with the questions. So half of the questions are based on the textbook. So we could actually easily use the textbook language practice questions or workbook practice questions and just move them online. So that's the first part. And together the TAs and the instructors come up with some, I won't call it free, but it's guided discussion that encourage students to use the patterns. For example, we all learn in 101, what's your name? My name is something. My last name is something. I'm from this country. I love something. So we would create, for example, pictures of Donald Trump, Justin Trudeau, ask them to introduce who this is. They have to say, this is Justin Trudeau. This is Donald Trump. His last name is Trump. His last name is Trudeau. It's not difficult. Every instructor have those information in their PowerPoint. So all we need to do is to pull our minds together, decide on questions, material part. For the speaker part, so we mostly rely on UBC students, our students from our university who has language expertise. But we also make use of the community members because it's online now. So in the past, the community members don't want to come to university because they don't have time. but now they are all open. We even have high school students who needs volunteer experiences, and they wanted to know what the university looks like. So they're so excited to join us. We also have Mandarin school teachers who wanted to see what the university language teaching is. So it really is coming from everybody. A bit of training is needed, but it has been going on well.
Is this a part of course requirement, or any, if students doesn't want to participate, they don't need to, or how do you?
So this year, because of the limited, it's online, and instructors feel that they don't have a lot of time one-on-one with students, and we have different course mode, mixed mode. In my course, I only get to see students 1 hour every week. So we have made this component mandatory. So all you need to do, you have to go, you have to practice. It's marked as completion or not completed or not completed. So as long as you want to put in the effort of practicing, we're happy. And you get one, so it's altogether 10%.
I have another question.
Sure, go ahead, please.
Would you mind showing some examples of your course for task assessment for each lesson? Like you had vocab, and so like, could you show some more examples?
Yeah, of course. So let's see, let me pick one, a random one here. So this is my, on the screen, you're looking at one dialogues exercises. The first 4 are vocabulary exercises. The first one is for students to do character and pinyin matching. This is automatically marked. So we have a list of characters and a list of pinyin. And the students just have to click, 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 click. It's a very easy task. Students can do it like in 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes. But then we try to trick them into do this once and get familiar with the characters. And then we have the character English matching, where it's, the first one is character pinyin, which is the character and the sound. And then we have character in English, which is meaning. And then we have the listening, we have the audio files matched with English. So they listen to one sound, they have to click which English word. These are all easy matching tasks. They don't have to, all they do is to click. The vocabulary exercises is more traditional. It's like a flashcard. You have an English, you put in the vocabulary that you're learning, provide the pronunciation. The next 2 are more about listening comprehension, about listening. The first one is listening comprehension. This is actually just from the textbook. Every textbook has a listening comprehension set of questions. We just move this online. And then it's not marked by us, it's marked by the computer. And we have listening, sentence listening and typing. We have a few sentences, audio files, and students listen to them. They type out the sentences that they hear. Again, it's automatically marked. I can't thank computer enough for doing this. We have other, this one, text to read and record and answering questions is where they do the speaking part. They read their dialogue. They answer some questions that I ask that I speak of, and they answer that. And then the last 3 here are grammar questions where they read the textbook grammar. I also put a video online. There are so many different videos online explaining, YouTube videos explaining the grammar point. So we found a set of good ones and we're using here. And based on the textbook and the video, we ask a few questions. It's either a pattern drill type of questions or a basic understanding type of exercise. So these are the general set of exercises.
Thank you so much. That was very, very informative and very practical again. We have comments and questions actually coming to my side, but for the interest of time, this is the break time. So for unanswered questions, I have comments and questions in the chatting box, but could you please ask the questions, unanswered questions to the speaker, Dr. Wang, so she will answer to your questions. Otherwise, it's a break time, so we'll take 10 minutes break time and then get back here by 4:22. Okay, thank you everyone. It was very wonderful presentations. Thank you for all our speakers.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the second part of our session. For our second part today, we will start with a presentation by Yugo Kinoshita. And after that, there will be a keynote address by Professor Rachel Harrison. For the presentation by Dr. Yugo Kinoshita, her paper will be on flipped classroom development and experiences in an ANU Japanese course. So please take it from here, Yugo. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Janet. I'll share the screen. Is this okay? Is everyone seeing my screen? Yep. Okay, good. Okay, so for ANU lower intermediate Japanese courses, which we call Japanese 3 and 4, the lecture delivery method was changed from face-to-face to flipped lesson in 2019 first semester. I was in the teaching team, but I wasn't involved in the initial implementation of this. But from the following semesters, I became in charge of this course. So I had to develop this flipped lesson format. So this was a quite interesting experience. It was introduced in pre-COVID time. But then this year, with all the online teaching and learning, this flipped lesson structure came quite handy. And I learned a lot from this, so I thought I might share this experience with everyone. Okay, so, flipped lesson, I think everyone knows what it is, but traditionally we have in-class teaching and then that was followed by students studying at home. Flipped lesson is reverse of that, but this idea itself isn't particularly new. We all know that if students prepare for the class by doing reading and everything, they learn better. And hopefully they all do that, but it's not the case. So if we give some structured way, some guidance in their preparation, maybe they can do that more effectively, or maybe we can engage them more in the preparation. And also incentive mark might help. And hopefully they come to class and go home and study more. So just a quick background of that project. So 2019 implementation, the first implementation, I wasn't actually involved in this, so I don't know what was the initial reason, but I suspect it was a cost reduction because 2018, we had 5 contact hours for the second year Japanese course. But from 2019, it became 4 hours because the lecture became the flipped lesson. So how it goes is it's based on a reading passage in a textbook called Jokyue no Tobira. And we had 11 flipped lessons over 12 weeks semester, and usually covering 1 chapter over 2 weeks. And it was given the 15%, so 11 flipped lessons with 15% of a total grade. And the student accessed this flipped lesson through their study site, which was offered on an ANU online learning platform called Wattle. It's basically a Moodle. It's sort of implemented in an ANU special way. And one thing is this study site was separate from main course Wattle site. So the structures, so self-study site was designed to be the one-stop page for all the homework for students. So from the instructor's mind, it's quite logical structure, really. They have flipped lessons, and they also have non-accessible revision quizzes. And then some other informations for other assessments and links for the submission and all that. And then the flipped lesson was kind of structured in 4 different components. So this is an example. It's just screenshot from the first implementation of this self-study page. So what we are seeing here is this is week 3, and this is the topic of the reading passage. And this one shows its vocabulary and the kanji list. And then this one is vocabulary and kanji quiz. And this is lecture videos, and this is a content and grammar quiz. And here have some instruction on other assessments which are due on that week. So we thought that's reasonably well organized. So following semester that I became a convener of this course, so I had to develop the second half of this flipped lesson. And to do that, well, I have to know how students found it. So I went back to the students' feedback, the written comments on that, end of the semester student feedback. And as far as I can work out, I found about 3 positive comments and 15 negative comments. Sounds like associated with flipped lesson, may not clearly say flipped lesson, but sounded like that. So there was some issues. Students' feedback, overwhelming sentiment I got was confusing. The reason for the confusion, there are different reasons, but this was the main theme I got. And this was also the actual direct feedbacks I got from students throughout the semester. And other things, it's too much work or it's not engaging. So there are issues. But I thought if students are confused, they tend to think it's a lot of work, and then they can get disengaged. So the first strategy I got was, let's reduce the confusion and see how it goes. So what other issues? What confused them? Multiple course sites. We thought that was quite a sensible arrangement, one-stop homework page, but it wasn't so from students' viewpoint. They said they weren't sure where to find the information. And when you have 2 sites, it's inevitable. You sometimes forget to update information on the one page. So there are conflicting informations. And also students got confused what's accessible and what's not accessible. Other thing was timing of release of the flipped lessons, because in that first implementation, it was developed as semester goes, as semester went. The timing of the flipped lesson being released was not consistent. So students thought that they can go and study the flipped lesson, but it's not ready yet, or something like that. That confused students. And another feedback we got was they couldn't see clear link between the flipped lesson content and what they are doing in a classroom. And well, another thing is many of our students, even though it's a second year Japanese course, they are first year university students. Everything is new. They are not used to university study. Everything is confusing. So all of those things were the contributing factors. So what can I do? Well, I have to redesign the course site structure because that was one of the issues. And another thing is, well, I have to plan early and then make the lessons in early stage. And I have to work on the communication strategy as well. So I'll talk about these 3 action items in this order. So first of all, plan early, plan everything was my first strategy. So to reduce the confusion, I thought improving the consistency of everything will probably reduce the confusion. So first of all, what I did was creating very detailed schedule of the entire semester. What's in a flipped lesson, what's in every single tutorial throughout the semester. And also I created a system which is easy to track and review and communicate with assistants. I had my tutors as a development assistants, and then it's really important for us to communicate clearly which section we are working on and so forth. So it sounds banal, but something like paragraph numbering and also labeling conventions for the quizzes. For instance, this is one of the example. It's a lesson 8 means chapter 8, but lesson 8, the first half, second half, vocabulary quiz, or bunpo means grammar. So it shows the type of quiz, and paragraph 3 and paragraph 5. So which paragraph those quizzes attached to. Also, I thought deciding on a format and stick to it. So throughout the semester, students know what is the format, and it doesn't change. So that includes types and the number of questions and the overall structure of flipped lessons. So in terms of types and number of questions, this is what we prepared. 10 vocabulary quiz, 10 grammar quiz, 5 about content, and 10 kanji and for listening. And that was consistent in every flipped lesson. And the flipped lesson structure, this is sort of overall layout. If it's the first week to cover that particular lesson, I would have an introductory video. So talking about the topic we were going to cover and that sort of thing. And then we have this preparatory section. I said, okay, now you have to study the vocabulary here to here, and they have vocabulary quiz, which prepare them to watch the video lecture. This is a mini lecture on 1 or 2 paragraphs. So lecture video doesn't go more than 10 minutes. So 5 to 10 minutes sort of mini video. And then we have content and grammar quiz, which is linked to this lecture section. And this bit will be repeated for the number of paragraphs we cover in a 1 flipped lesson. Then it was followed by kanji study instruction and the kanji quiz. And every 2 weeks they had a listening practice. And then final page basically said, yeah, that's it. That's the end of the lesson. So, and then this was packaged using lesson activity. I was rushing through and I just forgot one thing, but in a previous implementation, those quizzes were offered in a quiz activity of the Moodle. Quiz activities allow us to bundle any number of any types of quiz, and it's really good, and it gives students a feedback, which if we provide feedback. The lesson activity is really good. It can bundle not just quiz, but the videos and the readings and everything, and we can dictate the flow of the study. Students have to follow the lesson. So in that way, it's really good, but it has one issue. it doesn't show students the feedback. So when students get wrong, students won't know the right answer. So that's a bit of an issue. So what we did was creating a main course site, which has basically everything. All the course related information, course schedule, assessment submission links, and flipped lesson. And then another thing is flipped lesson closes on the morning where they have workshop related to the flipped lesson. So it's hard deadline, it's closed. And then I prepared a flipped lesson well ahead of time. So a lot of flipped lessons are already open. So students, if they want to study ahead, they can. Just a deadline was the hard one. And I created a self-study site which have only non-accessible self-study material. So I figured what mattered to students is what's accessible and what's not accessible. So separating those two, I thought might make students' life easier. So on this self-study site, I gave exactly the same quiz and the lecture videos as a flipped lesson. But in this site, I made it in a quiz activity format so that in this site, students can get the right answer and all the feedbacks. And the self-study quiz opens after flipped lesson closes each week. So we have workshops on Monday morning. So flipped lesson closes on a Monday morning and I open the corresponding self-study quiz on a Monday morning. So this is a bit of a screenshot. This is how I presented my weekly schedule. So there's a weekly schedule and this is week 6. And how I did it is I put everything students learn in a week in a one page. So this is a flipped lesson and here's a link. And student click here and then go to flipped lesson. And they come to Monday, they study this material, they come to Tuesday, they learn this. Wednesday, in this particular time, it was test, and on Friday, there is a content. So everything is presented in an order that students work. And this is the example of a self-study site. Each lesson, each self-study quiz was presented in one panel. So this is week 1's panel. It shows all the quizzes, which was previously presented in a flipped lesson. And there's a video as well. So here students can pick and choose which quiz they want to do. They can just check what they got wrong and so forth, so forth. Then communication strategy. The overwhelming sentiment I had from students after the first implementation was confusing. So I have to think about how to communicate, how to work on this. Because flipped lesson, a lot of them are not very familiar format. So first thing I did was creating a map. So conceptual map, shall I say. So this is a slide example. So it's basically saying how to study Japanese 4. These dark green bits are all what they have to do at home. Right, light greens, they shows what they do in class. So this says by Sunday evening, you have to read this and you do flipped lesson. Then Monday, Tuesday workshop, then Wednesday tutorial, then Friday tutorial. But after Monday and Tuesday workshop, they can go to revision page, self-study site. So I gave this map to students right at the beginning. And I tried to make sure that what they are going to study in a workshop, in a mini lecture, so that they have more sense of those things are connected. And also expectation management, and then communicating the benefit. I found it's really important. So I told them, okay, look, it's really useful for you. If you prepare before you come to the class, you can make most of precious face-to-face time with the teacher. And also, this is a very good way of developing steady studying habits. And also, this is important. It's not a test. A lot of students at the beginning complained that they felt it's unfair to be assessed for the material they were not taught. That's how they saw it. So I had to explain that it's actually not test. We are rewarding them for doing preparation. It's not trying to assess or test them. So if they do preparation, we know that preparation is useful for them, but they need some incentive. That's why we are giving you mark for this. So if you frame that way, students seems to be able to cope with it better. So, and another important thing is keep reminding students of these points throughout the semester. Saying once at the beginning of the semester doesn't land on them. So keep telling them that. Okay, so the experience. Just to see how we are traveling, I did a survey. So I surveyed this current cohort of Japanese 4 students. We have about 66 students enrolled at the moment, and I got a response from 53, so about 80% response rate. So are they finding this useful? Quiz and lecture, 79% and 85%. So that's quite a positive response. And I asked them how long they spend on that. I envisioned them to spend from 1 to 2 hours to 2.5 hours. So most of them are in that zone I anticipated. So their quantity seems to be okay. And then, is this integrated well in the course? Can they see the connection? 94% of students seems to see the connection, so that's going well. And I asked them, do they actually use self-study material? The answer is a bit less than half do, but here's an aspirational one. I haven't done it yet, but I will do that before exam, right? So, and I asked them, how do you complete this sentence? And they allowed to do the multiple answers. So these are the kind of what I see as an advantage of flipped lessons. So about 60% and 52%, those students are seeing that. And if I put this line here, because this is kind of negative and this is a positive comment. And a bit boring, 28%, quite interesting, 50%. So it's not completely mind-numbingly boring. And this is just to see the difficulty level. Not too hard, not too easy, so it seems to be roughly right. But this one, too much work. More than 1/4 of students said it's a bit too much work. So I had a look at it. How long are they spending on this? So the student who said it's a lot of work, about half of them were spending less than 2 hours. So I'm not going to worry about them. So these two, they're spending a lot of time and they're finding it a little bit burdensome, but mostly they're finding it useful. So there are some tweak needed, but it's not too bad. Final question, which would you like? Face-to-face or flipped lesson? This is the result I got. It's not definitive at all, 60-40 with 53, it's pretty small sampling number. So only thing I can say is flipped lesson, if we plan well, and it's not what I have isn't perfect, but if we carefully work through, this can be as good as perhaps face-to-face lectures. And especially when we go back to face-to-face teaching and the students started going out or having a more social life, they might actually enjoy this flexibility more. We don't know. So what I can say is, it looks like flipped lesson can be effective delivery option, but requires a lot of leading up time and careful planning. And the consistency in the structure and the format appears to reduce confusion and frustration. And the communication is really important, especially the benefits and the intention behind the format. And that can change students' perceptions and motivation. But students really wanted immediate feedback on the quiz. So that's something I really have to think about. And I realized that actually lesson activity have this complicated branching function. I haven't explored yet, but that might help me to give students immediate feedback. So that's something to work on. So that's it. Thank you very much. And this is a bit of acknowledgement. I had a really good supporting team. Their tutors, Amy and Maho, helped develop the quiz, and Grazia, Daishi, and Ethan for technological support, and the CHL for development funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuko Sensei, so much for your presentation. It's really inspiring. The detailed layout and everything, and you give us what we can kind of look at as a model as well. That's really fascinating. I would like to welcome questions from the floor right now. So if any of you have any questions, please put it in the chat box, or we have around like a few minutes so you can turn on your camera, turn on your microphone, and you can ask Yuko directly if you're comfortable doing that as well. And now, while we are waiting for the questions from the floor, I just would like you to give us, to tell us a little bit more about the workload on your part.
That's it. Yeah, what I did, I got a lot of support. So Amy and Maho did all the quiz development. So what I did was mapping out the system and overseeing the flow, and then recording the lectures, and then kind of coordinating with technology team. And Daishi did the packaging, or it's not difficult to make the lesson module, but it's time consuming. So yeah, you need a lot of lead up time.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing with us, because I feel like to have these really well thought out and thorough and well planned activities, it's great to have support from your colleagues and from someone who help you with different components of the course.
Yeah.
So do you think you will carry this forward? Say okay, we come back to face-to-face class environment now.
Yeah, I mean, well, the contact hour has been reduced, so I don't think it can be increased. So for this course, probably flipped lesson will stay. It has we can still redevelop, and especially the feedback issues. I think we have to improve it, but yeah, I think we will stick to this one. And I think there is possibility that students might like it better once they go back to the face-to-face teaching. At the moment, they are missing face-to-face contact. So if they are asked, would you like face-to-face or flipped lesson, some of them might preferred face-to-face. But once they started going back to face-to-face tutorial, they might not particularly fancy seeing me in a lecture theater. So, yeah.
I think you got quite a lot of compliments from the audience, especially Professor Wan from BU.
Oh, good.
Sorry, from UBC. Sorry about that, from UBC, yep.
Yeah.
Yep, very jealous as well that you have a great team of people to support you. Yeah.
Yeah, it has been great. Without them, I couldn't do it. No way.
Is this the same structure shared by other Japanese courses in the
No,
program?
I think at the moment we are the only one doing that. So yeah, it's a bit of a commitment, and for me, it's much more fun to do lecture face to face. I didn't enjoy recording these lectures, semester worth of lecture during the break. So it's a bit of a commitment. Yeah, but giving students incremental, so 1 or 2 paragraph worth of lecture and immediately followed by quiz, that format seems to work really well. I asked a few students how they find it, if they find it tedious or they prefer that. They actually prefer that. Yeah.
Right, they're lucky to have you as their instructor. So yes, I would like to give a big round of applause for Yugo Sensei, and thank you so much for your presentation and for sharing your experience with all of us. So for the last part of our session this afternoon, we have a keynote address from Professor Rachel Harrison. Her topic is stimulating embodied learning online. And because of the time difference, Rachel sent me her recording of her keynote address, but she will join us. She will join us for the Q&A after the video. So now I hope the technology being kind to me, and I hope there's no hiccups and the recording plays smoothly. Her recording has 2 parts. The first part has 30 minutes and the second part has 10 minutes. So if there's a little disruption during the transition between the 2 parts, so please bear with me. So I'm gonna start sharing the recording now. So please let me know if you can hear it or if there's any issues.
Hi everyone, greetings from London. I'm recording this on Friday afternoon, and I think that corresponds with the end of your first day of your conference on accentuating the positive, remote learning and the future of language education. I'm very grateful to you for inviting me to give the keynote lecture. It's a very great pity that I can't be with you and attended some of the other talks that have been taking place. It kind of tends to emphasize the remoteness of this experience and the disembodied nature of the experience of speaking and collaborating with each other online, which is the topic that you have all been attending to, and which I want to give some thoughts to in what are billed as closing remarks for this gathering. So thanks again for inviting me. I feel the experience of kind of pre-recording this and doing it in my own living room, possibly with the potential of a cat coming in and out across the screen from time to time, but I do hope not. A rather kind of strange and disembodied and dislocated experience. So it's some of that nature of the question of disembodiment that I want to raise with you, and very much look forward to being present at the end of this in the live Q&A session, which I will join. It'll be something like 7 in the morning in the UK, but I will prise my eyes open and be alert. Okay, so just to recap as a sort of starting point, I wanted to just go over the title and abstract that I'd submitted when I was invited to take part in this. I'll do that by reading from the script and just remind you of what it was that I wanted to talk about. So I entitled my abstract Simulating Embodied Learning Online, and I'll talk a little bit more about where that title actually comes from. The outline of this panel rightly reminds us that at its core, language education is about communication and connection. The challenge that we face in an ongoing pandemic of the proportions of COVID-19, and I'd say now that the proportions of COVID-19 look worse now than they were when I wrote the abstract a while back, is how to maintain such communication and connection within the confines of an essentially physically remote presence in a virtual classroom. Part of this is dependent on the form of technology at our disposal: Zoom, Collaborate, Microsoft Teams, etc. Some facilities are more visual and more flexible than others. But what we risk losing, even before we might fully have ever found it in the university classroom, is the opportunity for sensitive, multidimensional engagement with the education/communication process. I guess I'm not saying anything here that you haven't already discussed at length in your deliberations prior to this. This process occurs not only at the level of spoken language, it's more fully embodied and performative than that. It's conveyed in body language, in the gaze, in the sounds of the breath, and in silence. Refining our approach to fully engaging with and educating another person means, at its best, becoming attuned to all these subtleties. Honing our skills at teaching each individual in a group according to their individual/cultural needs means having access to experiences that are denied us in the online exchange. And I finished the abstract with a couple of questions, and I'm not sure whether that was really a good idea because I might not have the answers to them. Can we compensate for that? And if so, how? I have to say that I wrote the abstract without having had a huge amount of experience online teaching. And for me, that comes as a result of our classes having been closed down last March due to COVID-19. That was more or less the end of our academic year in the UK. And our academic year commenced again in the last 2 weeks, starts at the end of September, and teaching begins in the first week of October. So this marks the end of the first week of teaching in the new session. Prior to that, I'd done some intensive revision classes with my Thai language students. And this week I've been doing lectures on our MA Cultural Studies class and on Cultural Studies of Mainland Southeast Asia. So I've been developing more of a kind of hands-on experience of what it really feels like to try to do not so much lectures, which are a one-to-one or a monologue in a sense, but particularly tutorials and seminars which require and elicit input from a large group of people. So while I feel uncomfortable with this particular format of talking into a screen in my living room, fighting off the cat with one arm, in a sense, providing you have the confidence and the sufficient, here we go, the sufficient flow of concentration to be able to keep on speaking, I think that's one thing. What I miss enormously from giving a pre-recorded online lecture, which I've been doing this week for the cultural studies students, is that the nature of interaction. So traditionally speaking at SOAS, because we're a specialist institution, we tend to have, particularly in the humanities rather than the social sciences, we tend to have very small classes. And the benefit of having those small classes is that it makes it possible for us to have really good interaction with the students. And the way in which I conduct my lectures is that I don't like to divide them between, a 1-hour lecture and a 1-hour seminar, but to make the lecture as interactive as possible, encouraging people to contribute with ideas or to respond immediately to the kind of issues that we're talking about with their own deliberations. That luxury is very much lost in the online format, and even in the seminars, as you will all know yourselves, even in conducting a seminar where group participation is expected, we still face the problem with Zoom and Collaborate of orchestrating how people respond, allowing them the space to speak, making sure that people who are more reticent can have an opportunity to speak or be encouraged to join in. In some ways, that is as difficult, if not more difficult, than it is in the classroom. And all of the kind of visual clues and visual cues that we respond to as teachers in the classroom are frustratingly removed in being able to orchestrate some kind of discussion. So, of course, I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know and haven't already experienced probably more keenly than I have. What came to mind in writing the abstract and preparing to join this discussion with you was something that I'd been thinking of in the year leading up to the outbreak of COVID-19, which deals with the question of embodiment. And that's why I've used embodiment in the title of this talk. Just to backtrack a little further, I think the question of embodiment derives from research that I've been doing in the past 3 years. And I want to say a little bit about that as a kind of forerunner to why I want to approach the topic of embodiment in relation to online learning. So 3 or 4 years ago, I was invited by a PhD student at Imperial College London, which deals with science, technology and medicine, to bring cultural studies and cultural understanding into play with the hard sciences. This is quite an unusual venture. We don't normally find, even in a place like SOAS, where we deal only with the humanities and social sciences, we already find that the way in which we study and interact with each other is very much in kind of intellectual silos, where we don't really collaborate enough or have enough to say to each other about the intersection between the social sciences and the humanities. But to take that leap from the humanities into the hard sciences is really very rare. And I think personally and hopefully in collaboration with colleagues have benefited enormously over the last 3 to 4 years of being able to bring the humanities into dialogue with the hard sciences. And I've done that through a project initiated by my colleague at Imperial. I've done that in a project dealing very specifically with a health issue in relation to Northeast Thailand. So we have been able to get funding from the Wellcome Trust in the UK and from the Arts and Humanities Research Council in collaboration with the Medical Research Council in the UK to investigate the question of the very high numbers of cases of bile duct cancer that appear in Northeast Thailand and Lao PDR. Now, that sounds like a really kind of specific health issue, and it is. Bile duct cancer is a very rare cancer, that appears across the world. But in northeast Thailand and Lao PDR and parts of Cambodia and Myanmar, cases of bile duct cancer are much higher than elsewhere as a result of their connection with infestation of liver fluke, which sits in the bile duct. It's a parasite that sits in the bile duct. Of liver fluke that leads to inflammation of the bile duct, that in turn leads to higher rates of bile duct cancer than in other parts of the world. And that the infestation with liver fluke that leads to inflammation of the bile duct results from the consumption of raw or partially cooked or incorrectly fermented freshwater fish of the type that is found in the Mekong River Delta. So here you can immediately see that there's a connection between a public health issue, a proliferation of a particular kind of cancer, and a cultural issue, which revolves around the predilection for eating a particular kind of food that leads to a health issue. So here's a point in which there's an intersection between culture and the humanities and the hard sciences, and the range of disciplines that we have brought into play in dealing with this kind of research issue ranges from cultural studies, film studies, literary studies, anthropology, ecology and the environment, human geography, physical geography, then parasitology, biochemistry, surgery, medicine, and broader questions of public health and practice. And I missed out sociolinguistics. That's also a part of this project as well. The reason that I'm talking about this is because having done research on this field over the last 3 to 4 years and being able to forge a kind of interdisciplinary team of dimensions that I think are pretty kind of rare, it's led me to see how the question of embodiment and awareness of the body, of physicality, is missing in the work that we do in the humanities and social sciences, and indeed in the work that we do as educators and as pedagogues. And I have written a little bit about that in a paper that I wrote on, or co-authored last year on the field of area studies. So I guess for many of us working in language teaching and in cultural studies of the type that you are engaged in at ANU, we have really kind of appended our academic careers to the field of area studies. That's certainly how I came to working on Thai language. I did my degree in Thai language and history at SOAS in the early 1980s. So the primary focus of my undergraduate degree was learning Thai language, and learning that from a perspective of wanting to know more broadly about Thai culture, about Thai history, about everything that relates to the question of Thailand. That's a very kind of area studies type approach to academia of the sort that institutions like SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies, have long been particularly kind of famed for. That field of area studies, for me, grows out of a Western approach, a specifically Western approach to academic learning and knowledge, which has a basis, I think, in the Enlightenment from a Western perspective. It has a basis in Cartesian thinking, inspired by René Descartes, with the view particularly that our approach to academic knowledge from a specifically Western perspective deals with a form of knowing that is based in the brain and in the mind, and which is for me disembodied. It's about not knowing from other senses, other ways of experiencing the world. our focus in academia in Western forms of knowledge, which have in turn been, I think, inherited by and sold to, marketed to other parts of the world, revolve very much around the notion that our intellect is driven by the brain, and that any other forms of knowing and experience are relegated to superior brain-driven intellectual activities. And I want to say a little bit more about what I mean by that and how it impacts upon the kind of broader considerations that you have been dealing with in this workshop, in this conference up until now. So the Cartesian notion of I think, therefore I am, I think is the point at which we come to understand Western forms of knowledge as privileging the brain. And as time has gone on since Descartes, and particularly in the last 15 to 20 years with new discoveries in, for example, neuroscience, we've become much more attuned to the fact that our awareness is linked not only to brain activity, but that there are connections, very pertinent and important connections, between the body and the brain. Recent research in neuroscience tells us, for example, that much of our brain health and our mental health is connected up with gut health. What we eat, what we put into our bodies, what is able to kind of uphold a good sense of intestinal well-being has a direct connection on brain function. And this is quite a new idea, that there is a clear connection between how we think and how well other parts of our body are functioning. It's a good example to me of the fact that the way in which we function and know and think and understand the world isn't just based on thought and ideas, but is actually based on a much more holistic sense of being fully embodied. And I don't think that this is something that Western forms of knowledge have paid nearly enough attention to. So I don't think, for example, that in terms of the way in which we teach and study in the West has been attentive enough to taking into account our other senses of awareness, our senses of being fully relaxed, for example, before we speak in a classroom. I've often wanted in a classroom to collectively ask the students in the room with me to just spend the first 2 to 3 minutes of the class sitting together and breathing together. And the reason I haven't done it is a kind of reticence based on embarrassment. Will they think that I'm too kind of new age and too hippie to ask everybody to do that? I'm tempted to do it because I think at SOAS I could probably get away with it because we have a certain kind of hippie certain hippie credentials. But even then, I think this is too kind of off the wall to say to students, let's meditate together. Let's collectively create a sense in the classroom in which we are all focused and breathing to the same rhythm. I daren't even do that in a classroom in SOAS, even though I know that it's probably an extremely sensible and productive thing to do, because I don't want to alienate the students by suggesting something that feels uncomfortable. I actually think that in a way, and maybe I'm kind of just bracketing this off a little bit, I wonder if one of the experiences of teaching online through something like Zoom or Microsoft's Teams is that, in a sense, the disembodied approach to learning that facilitates for us actually might make it easier in some way to test out new things which would feel unusual or awkward or uncomfortable in a normal classroom experience. I might feel braver in a way at a distance to say to everybody before a class begins or a discussion begins on Zoom, let's sit collectively and breathe together. Because some of the awkwardness about doing something new is dissolved by that new approach to collectively speaking or collectively learning. It's just a thought. But I think going back to the topic that I was talking about, of learning in a Western context not being enough about the experience of being embodied, that we are not taught enough, both in terms of the way that we do research and in terms of the way we teach. We're not taught to think enough about all of the senses that are at play in the way that we learn. So we don't pay enough attention, I think, to how physical sensations in the body are telling us something about the topics that we are learning about. We are inattentive to those kind of cues. And coming back to the kind of sense of what it might be possible to do at a place like SOAS with its kind of greater awareness of different ways of being in different cultures of the world, I think that there are other cultures in Asia, Africa, and the nearer Middle East, which have been much better attuned to embodiment than we have been in the Western tradition of learning. And I think it's tremendously sad, and it's also a legacy of colonialism and imperialism, that we have, in terms of our international approach to learning, that those more attuned ways of being in the world have not been attended to sufficiently. So the Western kind of dominance in terms of ways of learning have written out those features which are very important, that are much better known in other cultures, in for example, in yogic practices in South Asia and in East Asia. Those practices have been much better known in philosophical approaches to being in the world than they have in the West. And yet they have been, in a way, kind of undermined or written out by the dominance of Western practices of knowledge. And I'm reminded of that by an experience that I had when I was in Shanghai a year ago, and talking to students at Fudan University precisely about these ways of learning and ways of knowing the world, and asking them. One of them mentioned that she couldn't stay for the rest of the meeting because she had to go for a medical appointment, and that prompted me to ask her about the practice of medicine in Shanghai, and how, whether she went, when she went to a medical appointment, whether she went to a traditional kind of Chinese approach to medicine, or whether diagnosis was took more Western forms. And she told me, and I was very surprised by her answer, she told me that all diagnosis is done according to kind of high-tech Western forms, CT scans, ultrasounds, and so on. But that sometimes traditional forms of Chinese medicine are practiced, such as kind of looking at diagnosing the tongue or diagnosing the pulse, but that these are done not by a doctor touching the pulse or a doctor looking at the tongue, but by machines. And I thought, what a terrible tragedy it was that this kind of very embodied one-to-one doctor-patient approach to knowing and understanding the patient and being able to diagnose the patient had been replaced by technology, because we privilege technology so highly that we think it can do something better than our face-to-face approach to learning and understanding, which is much more empathic, which privileges empathy in a way that I think is absolutely crucial to understanding and dealing with some of the problems that we face in the world today, but that is being written out of the picture. So what I'm saying there really is that our Western forms of knowledge and our privileging of technology have downplayed our ability to put center stage questions of embodiment in the way that we come to interact with each other, and that this has an enormous impact in the classroom. It has an enormous impact on the work we do as academics, both in research and in teaching. So that's my kind of preamble, in a way, to talk about why I think embodiment and focusing on our ability to listen, to see, to read visual cues from our students in the classroom is so important. We should not be doing, I think, what lecturers have traditionally done in the kind of high Western tradition, which is to go in to a classroom, to give a lecture, to talk, to expect students to take notes, to not expect them to tune out and to get bored, but to listen attentively and to hang on our every word, and then to be able to respond to that. I think what we need to do, and what we actually have been in a very good position to do if we're involved in language teaching, but this also applies to tutorials and seminars with group teaching in the disciplines. What we're in a much better position to do is to engage in all those senses. And I was really kind of thinking about this in terms of my first year language teaching last year when I was teaching Thai language, was that all those senses really are at play in language teaching. Of course, when we're teaching language, we're not just telling people how to understand grammar. We're asking them to listen carefully to the way a word is pronounced, particularly if it's a tonal language. We're asking them to not just
sorry for the interruption, our participants. I think the first recording has come to an end, and I'm gonna start with the second part of the recording straight away.
again. Sorry, I inadvertently the close button, the end button on the recording. So I need to pick up from where I left off just now, which is to say that I was talking about body movement in learning language. When I teach students how to make a falling tone, for example, on the word, on an example word like chop, to like, they've got a long vowel there and a clear opportunity to make a clear falling tone. Students are reticent in language classes about making sounds that they're not comfortable with, that are alien to them. So one of the things that's really important to do is to get them to lose their inhibitions. And you can do that, I think, by calling on embodiment. If you ask them to say the word chop, to accentuate the falling tone, to get them to really think about the fact that it's a falling tone there. It's good to encourage them, I think, to express that bodily, chop, to imagine that fall, that rise and fall that comes with the falling tone. Similarly, with a rising tone on a word like suwei, to imagine that dynamic of dipping down and then coming up again, to do that bodily. Suwei helps them to, strangely enough, to lose their inhibitions and to imagine exactly what the dynamic of that tonal rhythm is. So I think that we're, in a way, we're privileged as language teachers to be able to call on the features of embodiment more clearly than perhaps in the terms of teaching the disciplines. But I still think that in all the work that we do as academics, the legacy that we've inherited from traditional forms of Western learning have meant that we ignore embodiment, and we do so at our peril. I wrote a little bit about this in a paper last year on the question of area studies, and I wanted to just refer to it a little bit. I can add the reference in later if that's helpful, if you want to go back to the paper. But I wanted to refer a little bit to the material that I was dealing with in that paper, particularly thinking about why the body matters. And then I would like to close this this keynote lecture with thinking about the challenges that we face in translating some of that to the very kind of disembodied form of learning, learning and teaching outside the classroom online. Okay, so I refer to the paper here. Just a couple of points to make. I was particularly inspired by a text written by George Lakoff and Mark Johnson, called "Philosophy in the Flesh: The Embodied Mind and Its Challenge to Western Thought." That seemed to fit kind of the bill of what I was looking for very, very closely. And Lakoff and Johnson demonstrate that because our conceptual systems grow out of our bodies, meaning is grounded in and through our bodies. As a result, they call for a thorough rethinking of Anglo-American analytic philosophy and postmodernist philosophy, ideas which lie at the core of much of the traditional Western approach to learning. And I quote here from Lakoff and Johnson: "The same neural and cognitive mechanisms that allow us to perceive and move around also create our conceptual systems and modes of reason. Thus, to understand reason, we must understand the details of our visual system, our motor system, and the general mechanisms of neural binding. In summary, reason is not in any way a transcendent feature of the universe or of disembodied mind. Instead, it's shaped crucially by the peculiarities of our human bodies, by the remarkable details of the neural structure of our brains, and by the specifics of our everyday functioning in the world." That's Lakoff and Johnson, 1999, page 4. The authors consequently reach a threefold conclusion. One, that reason is not completely conscious, but mostly unconscious. Two, that reason is not purely literal, but largely metaphorical and imaginative. And three, that reason is not dispassionate, but emotionally engaged. The implication of these assertions in Lakoff and Johnson's view is that it's therefore impossible for any of us to share precisely the same disembodied transcendent reason as anyone else, or to be capable of knowing everything about his or her own mind simply by self-reflection. Again, I'm quoting: "What universal aspects of reason there are arise from the commonalities of our bodies and brains and the environment we inhabit. The existence of these universals does not imply that reason transcends the body. Moreover, since conceptual systems vary significantly, reason is not entirely universal." I think the kind of work that Lakoff and Johnson and others that I refer to in this paper are dealing with are extremely important for thinking about not only what's lost or what's undervalued in our education system that's dominated by Western modes of thought, but what is then further lost by this very disembodied form of learning online. And it's those thoughts that I want to conclude with. I can see I've got about 4 minutes left of the time slot that I've got. So if we are already challenged in the classroom to really attend to the role that the body and emotions are playing in our process of teaching and learning, it seems to me that we are much more challenged when we take away face-to-face interaction. When we don't sit around a table or stand in a lecture hall feeling the sense of others present with us, but are essentially speaking into a screen, as I'm doing now. I'm sitting in my living room with the cats, running around me, kind of enforcing the sense that that embodiment does matter, that animal instincts matter. But essentially, I'm sitting on my own in my living room, and I'm doing a recording and talking to you, and you won't hear this until 12 or so hours after I've recorded it or more. That there are so many delays in both location and time that we need to find a way of tuning into what is lost. I can't see your responses to what I'm saying, and if I could, I think that any degree of empathy might actually change the way in which I express myself, or indeed the things that I say. That process of interaction, which is already fragile, even in a classroom situation, is made even more fragile by the demands of isolation that COVID-19 brings upon us. And I'm concerned that we attend to this, because I think that already before COVID-19, the world was in a pretty precarious state. It's even more precarious now. And it seems to me that the way in which we deal with the precarious nature of human being in the world is to promote a sense of better understanding and more empathy. And it's extremely difficult, I think, to sharpen the need for empathy and sharpen those skills in a climate where we can't have easy face-to-face interaction. In a sense, however, it might really mean that if we can attend to this effectively, we might begin to understand just how extremely important empathy and communication are, and that we find ways in which to make those central to the ways in which we interact with each other. That can only make our abilities to learn and our abilities to understand, and indeed our abilities to interact as human beings, much better than they already are. Okay, thanks very much for listening to me, and I'm really looking forward to taking questions in the Q&A session. Bye.
So thank you so much, Rachel. Here we are. I just stopped sharing your recording, and welcome to our session. It's so lovely to have you here. And I just gonna welcome comments and questions from the floor. And if anyone comfortable, you're more than welcome to switch on your video and ask Rachel face-to-face virtually, just to create this sense of community. Thank you so much for your lecture. One thing, I didn't do a very good job introducing Rachel to the audience. Rachel Harrison, she's a professor of Thai cultural studies at the School of Languages, Cultures and Linguistics at SOAS, University of London. Rachel has published widely on issues of gender and sexuality and modern literature and cinema in Thailand, as well as the comparative literature of Southeast Asia. So here is Rachel Harrison.
Hi, nice to see you, almost really. I don't know how you want to take this session, Janet. Should we just open
yes,
up for questions?
please. I would like to invite questions and comments from the participant, and I think Yuko Sensei has something to say, and you can please start the dialogue. It would be lovely.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and at the ANU, we now talking a lot about decolonization of curriculum and things. So that was quite timely, and it was really interesting. Thank you. It's kind of bit off from your main thesis, perhaps, but one question. You talked about breathing together might help. That's a lovely idea, I think. But I can also see why you hesitate, and I would hesitate too. I'm just wondering if we want to introduce that sort of culturally entrenched sort of practice, I wonder if it's more effective to bring it in the middle of the class after they started speaking in a language and got into the more of the Thai mood or something. Then they can kind of cultural inhibition of colonial, like Western style academic learning might be kind of easier to negotiate. So I just wonder how you see it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, actually, that once you've been working together for a while in the group, it might seem less unnatural to invite people to do that. Even though for me, the greatest benefit would be to have right at the beginning. Am I freezing? Yeah.
Just a little, just 1 second delay. That's fine.
Oh, okay. But I think it would be ideal to kind of set that as the starting point for the way in which we work together collectively in the group. But you're absolutely right. That it could. I mean, my worry is, and I've never done it because I think it could really backfire, and everyone would just start the class thinking, "Wow, she's really weird," and that's not really what I had in mind. But no, I think to do it in the middle of the class would actually use it and might feel more comfortable doing it right from the start. But it's how to introduce the idea from the beginning, I think.
Yeah. So once you do that in the middle of class a few times, then after that, maybe subsequent classes, they might be more ready or something.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I think that's a really, really good suggestion. And actually, I might be brave enough to try that. I might try it with my Thai language class first. Yeah, because I think you could introduce it as part of language learning. That it's slightly more artificial to do it, perhaps with a discipline-based tutorial or seminar.
I think of like decolonization or kind of trying to deviate from Western style academic learning. I think Asian language can play quite significant role because we have quite different cultural practice from traditional colonial powers. So I'm kind of thinking out loud basically, but interested in what we can do for that.
Yes. I guess there's one thing that I would like to add in relation to that, and it's really to follow on from the idea that if we think about emphasis on embodiment and the breath as being much more part of, I don't want to say non-Western culture because I hate the term, but cultures, Asian and African and Middle Eastern cultures, for example, the problem that we face is I don't want to fall into that colonial trap of saying the non-West is about the body and the West is about the brain. So that's also a kind of, it's very difficult, I think, to decolonize because there are so many traps and hazards that in the process of decolonizing, you can simply fall back on colonial stereotypes.
All right, thank you.
There's one question from the floor. Ling Hong has one question, and then Juan would ask another question. Please, so if you're more comfortable asking Rachel directly, please do so. You're more than welcome to.
Hi, Rachel. I find it a very interesting idea. Is that for
face-to-face class only, or how can we practice this for online class? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, that was my problem, Li Hong, that I don't know the answer to my question. I think it's a learning process. I think you have to, but I'm actually pretty new to doing online teaching. We only started teaching this week, actually. So I'm experimenting with things that work. I actually did have a sense when I did the discussion group with my MA Cultural Studies students that in some ways there's some advantages actually of using Zoom. It's somehow easier to be able to orchestrate the class and to pick out people who haven't spoken. I always find that difficult in class because I don't want to put them on the spot in front of everyone else and see their anxiety. So actually some of the things that you don't see through Zoom might free you up a little bit to say, okay, I can see somebody sitting there who hasn't spoken, you know, and bring them in. So there are some ways, I think, in which the disembodiment can kind of free you up as well. But no, it's very much a learning process. I don't know the answers to these questions, but I do think that it's important for us all to think about them and be aware of what the effects are, as I'm sure we are anyway. I mean, I'm not saying anything that people don't know already. We all immediately feel on a Zoom lecture or something similar that it's a very weird sensation.
Thank you for giving us this idea, and it's worth discovering the solution. Thank you.
And Wang has a question, please.
Yeah, hi, Dr. Erson. It's Chen from University of British Columbia. I'm from Canada. I guess this is more like more of a comment rather than a question, because you know, I'm going to be very frank. I think the talking about the idea of improvement in this drastic change from face-to-face class to online class, it's just like, oh, do I really have to think about this right now? But strangely enough, when I was sitting through the talk, I can almost feel that the importance of talking about this at this time. From my experience of using Zoom for the past 5 weeks. Well, I used Zoom for summer teaching for 2 months. It's like you do see students from a different light. You force them to turn on their camera. Like in my Zoom setting, I had the setting of automatically turn on their camera when they first join Zoom. And you see them quickly turn off their camera and mute themselves, like right away. Like that's what they do, the first thing they do. But once they start to feel more comfortable, because I ask them also it's mandatory to turn on their camera when they do quizzes. Once they get comfortable, after the quizzes, some of them would actually leave their camera on without the, you know, the urge to have to turn off their camera. I feel I don't want to say it's harder to build that confidence within the class, but it's definitely a different approach to build that confidence with each other, and to like the idea of embodiment is probably going to be different. We're never going language classes, in my view, are always those courses in university that highlights the idea of embodiment. In a smaller class, we share everything, we share ideas, we sing together, we sit together, sometimes we hold hands, just not allowed at all whatsoever. But we used to be at the frontier. We were able to do that. And especially if we teach an Asian language, I do the trick that you did for the Thai tones. We sing Chinese tones, right? We say, ha, ha, like we do that, but it's much harder now. I almost have to jump up and down in front of my camera to say a falling tone to let them know. But they, you know what, they laugh. Yes. Once they start to laugh, it seems that the next thing that's going to happen is that they're more likely to keep their camera on. I'm going to say it's still difficult, but maybe we still have a fight there to carry through this idea that I think I really believe in. It's just it just seems so hard nowadays. So I actually don't have a question. It's just I was kind of forced to think about this. It's so hard, but still, thank you for bringing this up and force us to think into this.
Well, thank you for sharing your experiences. I mean, that's really, really interesting. I think the things that you've been encountering and coming to terms with, and I suppose just in response to your initial kind of frustration, or oh, do I really have to think about embodiment now on top of everything else? I suppose for me, I was already thinking about it, and there's something about a global pandemic that makes you think about embodiment even more, because it really brings home the fact that our embodiment matters tremendously to the way that we lead our day-to-day lives, and we can't lead them normally at the moment. So it's always there.
Yep. Thank you so much for your comments and sharing with us. Eun-Son Kim, San Sang Nim, it's your turn. Please ask. Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel, for your very inspiring presentation, and a question from Hoa. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much for your inspiring talk. And then, as I was listening to your presentation, I was reflecting on my own teaching. And then here at ANU, we just passed 9 weeks out of 12 weeks. And then I talked about this with Jeanette a lot. I feel like this semester, I feel like myself as a YouTuber. Like, I use a lot of hand gestures and even eye gaze, and I just use all of my senses to engage myself to students. For example, like, I do a lot of thumbs up to encourage students, and then I do this, and then I beg my students, can you show your reactions? Then otherwise I will just shout, in my empty office. So I was wondering if you have any tips to share with us using your senses and body movements to kind of have your students engaged and focused and being interested?
No, I don't have any tips. I think you know much more than me because you've had much more experience of doing it. And I suppose rather fraudulently, my what kind of issues should we be thinking about and attending to? But in terms of actual experience, I mean, it's because we start our term so much later than you. You're a long way ahead of us on this side of the world. But I guess in response to what you're saying about using more hand gestures, actually overemphasizing in a sense the things that would be that you'd need to do kind of more subtly in a face-to-face interaction. I wonder what the impact of that is when we get back into the classroom. Do we actually become kind of larger than life once we're back in? And maybe that's a good thing, because maybe students actually will respond to that better. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I'm definitely keeping a kind of a close eye and some daily notes on what those experiences are like of how you bring people along with you, because so much of it is about being actually physically near them and kind of, in a sense, holding them through the experience of learning. And it's very hard to do it. I think it's very hard to do it on a screen. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your insights with us.
Oh, thank you for sharing yours.
So now it's 5:48, but I welcome everyone to share your thoughts and comments, because I think this is something that with us being in this situation, we try to make the most of the online platform that we have. We're trying to do the best we can to deliver the best learning experience to the student. And I wonder if this embodiment aspect of it is something that we know is crucial. But like Dr. Wang said, oh, but we're so pressed in time, we have to do it. We have to redo the assessment. We have to do it fairly. We have to be, so there's so many things. So there's so many things going on at the same time. So, and if anyone would like to share your thoughts, experience, or if there's anything that you would like to engage in this conversation with us, please do so.
Yeah, as I said yesterday, so one purpose of for this session is to exchange our experience. Probably have a different experience in different part of the world. So anyone from, the presentation itself is very interesting, very good, but want to know if what's going on in class side in USA, for example, or I saw the Yoneda sensei from the New Zealand. They share your experience going in your classes. Yoneda sensei has, can you share your experience there?
Hello everyone, I'm Yoko from New Zealand. Hello, お久しぶりです。Thank you so much for your all of your very inspiring presentation. And my experience in New Zealand. I think New Zealand is one of the luckiest countries during this time, because we came back to face-to-face this trimester. So yeah, from when? Yeah, a few months ago, New Zealand became quite safe, and then especially I'm living in Wellington, capital city, and yeah, it became face-to-face possible. And so yeah, I thought a lot about what Professor Harrison said regarding this embodiment into class. Sorry, but I was just remembering what I was thinking during the lockdown. New Zealand lockdown was very harsh, very strict, one of the most strict lockdown in the world, I think. 4 weeks, really completely locked down. And our university closed 6 weeks. And during that time, we are completely isolated. And I was communicating with students, and I realized, as you said, it's so important when you study, not just switch on and then listen to the lecture and do your work, but you know, so for example, waking up in the morning and then have a morning sun and so on is really important. And I started thinking that when it becomes face-to-face, someday, I started thinking at the time that maybe we can, we are in a small town, so maybe we can start walking together toward the campus in the morning or something like that, because my class was 10 o'clock in the morning. A lot of students had a habit of waking up late and just switch on the computer with the pajama and so on. And then gradually mental issues increased among students. And I thought probably once, you know, something, the alert level is eased, and then we can kind of, you know, with the social distance, we can kind of see each other outside or something. I was really thinking about maybe going outside and then going for walk together or something like that with students. Yeah, now we are lucky. We started face-to-face, and so yes, students are very, they really appreciate coming back to the classroom. And then I feel somehow I'm having one of the best time in teaching during this trimester, because I feel we just so appreciate each other being in the class and then talking to each other. Yeah. I don't know, maybe New Zealand students are lovely. Not only that, but I think we realize that not being able to see each other physically really deteriorated their mental health and our motivation. And yeah, now we are back, and then yeah, it feels really great. And so I hope other countries can have the same experience as we have. Yeah, sorry. He suddenly pointed me, so I feel. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, so you didn't have to come join this session for remote teaching.
Yeah, but
No,
we
no,
are
it's just
doing
joking.
we are doing a dual mode at the moment.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So always, you know, we have to prepare for a online option always. So
Yeah.
it's also my strong interest to learn.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, any other comments, or anyone would like to share your thoughts from the floor? Because I mean, for me, I feel like us as educator, we kind of being thrown into the situation, and we have to make the most of whatever time or platform or technology that we have. But one thing that I strongly feel as a result of this session that we have, I'm grateful that despite the situation, we are able to bring colleagues from different parts of the world to share the experience. And yesterday and today, I have learned a lot, and there's many inspiring speakers, and there are many inspiring models, and I have seen ways that I can improve on my own class, and it's a really great learning experience for me as well. So just before we close for today, I would like to invite Rachel to just give us some final thoughts just before we close the session. Sorry, I didn't mean to pass you a hot potato, but I just think it's appropriate to do that. Just some final thoughts, some words of like, is there anything particular that you think we need to bear in mind when we approach this online learning? Because for me, one thing that I hold very dear to my heart is the empathy. We need to have that quality in ourselves in this situation. So please do share your thought.
Sorry, unmute self first. I guess maybe one sort of parting thought picks up on one of the previous questions. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. Yes, Chin Wang from British Columbia. I think you said we already have so much to do. You know, we've got, and Janit, you followed that up. You said, you know, as an academic now, you've got marking, you've got preparation, you've got admin. This is the life that we face as academics. It's not going to get any better. It's likely, I think, to get a lot worse. But I think that we have always to bear in mind that that's in some ways, it's a distraction from really doing and what we hold dearest, perhaps, in a classroom. The most important thing in a classroom is to teach our students in a way that opens up their minds to having new experiences and new ideas. And it's incredibly easy to be distracted from that mission by all the other stuff, I'll call it stuff, that goes with the job now. And to me, that's why kind of being tuned in and embodied also really, really matters, because I think for me, it's a kind of metaphor as well for what's happening in the world at large, that if we take our eyes off the ball, somehow terrible things happen with human rights and with abuses of people and kind of abuses of immigration and so on. There's all things going on in the world that we need to be really tuned in. And I think for us, being in the classroom and being tuned into our students and creating for them the best possible learning experience they can have is the most important thing that we can do.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Last but not least, just before we close our session with so much food for thoughts here, I would like to thank you, Rachel Harrison, for your keynote address, and I would like to thank all of our presenters and our participants here. I know it's Saturday afternoon, and in different part of the world, it's probably different time. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your interest. And hopefully we will see you again next year. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You did a really good job.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you for staying up.
I know.